just to let you know.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you can still hear us. Can you still see this video?
Yeah. No, I can still see you. I can see the slides. We're all good.
Right. Okay. Can you still see the slides?
Yes.
Fantastic. We've got it.
Okay, I've just turned on broadcasting, so we are live. We should be live anyway. Good evening, everyone. Obviously, you won't be able to reply to us, but there is a chat box on the website if you want to get in touch with myself or Sean or Mike throughout the evening. Feel free to post your questions there. Sean and Mike, just want to say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike. Hi, guys. It's Sean.
Now, we'll get started in just a few minutes. We have just sent out the link to everyone, so we'll give everyone some time to get into the room, and we'll get started. What, maybe about 5 minutes, guys? Does that suit you?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Perfect. Now, the good thing about this, if you've come onto the website and you've got the lease option chat box live just under the video of this, if you register in there, I'll be able to see your names. You don't need to register in order to share messages with us, though. You can just do it as a guest. Starting to see a few familiar names in the room, which is great to see. So like I say, we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes and we shall get started. You'll be switching between the video of myself and the slides shared by Sean and Mike. So hopefully that should work without a hitch. If you, at any point you can't hear us, you can't see the screen, anything goes wrong, again, just let me know in the chat box and I'll try to figure that out, and I'll leave Sean and Mike to share all the content on Lease Options. I'll be the IT geek tonight, and I'll leave them to be the property experts.
That sounds good to us.
Now, Sean and Mike, just for your awareness, there is a bit of a delay between what we're saying and what the audience are seeing on the website. The way it works is, obviously, we're broadcasting this through Google Hangouts via YouTube. So YouTube will be recording this, and we will send out the recording afterwards for everyone if they want to go back in and re-listen to what you've had to share today. But because of the way it's set up, there is a delay of about 30 seconds between us talking and them hearing it. So if there are any questions posted by the group, bear with me. If you think I've missed it, I will get to it at some point during the night. But because of that slight delay, we might have moved on by the time the question comes through, at which point we will come back to it at the end. The way the night's going to work, basically, just in a few minutes, I'll give a brief introduction to myself, to Sean, and to Mike, of what we're here to do tonight. Then the guys are going to share with us their introduction to Lease Options, which is a fantastic presentation, a fantastic way to start learning more about lease options and how they can be so valuable as a strategy to add to your own property investing portfolio. And as I said, there will be time for Q&A at the end. By all means, ask questions throughout the event. And if we don't get time to answer them during the presentation, Sean, Mike, and myself will hang around at the end until everyone's questions are answered and make sure that you're all leaving here with as much knowledge as you can on lease options and, as I say, how you can implement them into your own portfolio. So it's worth just saying hi, good evening to everyone that has joined. I see that there's a couple of people already typing away in the chat box. So we've got Scott Oliver, who's joined us, Paul Manning, Tado9. I'm going to guess that's not his real name. If it is, it's a pretty cool name. And Samuel as well. If anyone else wants to say hello, we'd love to hear who else was in the room. But by all means, if it suits you better just to sit back and listen and enjoy the dulcet tones of us Northerners and Scots, then that's absolutely fine.
Don't forget the Scouse.
Exactly, yeah. And it looks like Jason's getting in there early with a question as well. It's a good one. I'll save that for you guys for a bit later on. I'll let you run through the content first. I don't know if you guys got the chat screen up in front of you as well.
Yes, I've just seen that question. That's
excellent.
We'll answer that later on.
Nice for him to get it in early, so you got some time to prepare for that. Okay, we're about 5 minutes over when we were scheduled to start. I imagine some people will be getting their email and joining us as time. Oh, as I was just saying that, we've had a question pop up from Paul, and I'm going to turn that over to you. I don't dare to get involved in this. It's maybe best that we just ignore the question and move on.
Let's have a look. Liverpool. This is where he just beep offline.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to ruin the audience. Anyway, I was about to say, given we're about 5 minutes over, I think we will get started. I'm sure a couple others will join us throughout the course of the evening. And like I say, if anyone needs to, well, for the benefit of people that are watching this at some point in the future, sorry you couldn't make it on the night, but I'm sure the content will be just as valuable for you. And if you've got any questions afterwards, feel free to get in touch with myself or Sean or Mike, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have as a follow-up to this. Now, as some of you will know from the emails that I've been sending out, my name is Mike Stanhouse, and I host a podcast called Inside Property Investing. A podcast is basically, it's like a pre-recorded radio show on niche topics. And obviously with a title like Inside Property Investing, we chose to focus on property investing in the UK. And we interview inspiring and successful property investors. Sean's obviously been on the show. He was a great guest of ours a few months ago. We've had a whole host of different people covering a whole host of different property investing strategies. We release 3 episodes a week on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday. And it's a great way, whether you have a long commute into the office or you're regularly going to the gym, walking your dog. The great thing about podcasts is that they can fit into your life, whatever else you're doing. You don't need to stop your other activities in order to listen to them. To me, it was a great replacement for the radio when I was driving around a lot. And like I say, we interview these guys, we find out about their backgrounds, how they got started in property, what strategies they're focusing on, and we talk about their successes and also the difficulties that they've faced. If you ask for my perception, I often find that the best learnings come from the difficulties that people have gone through. I remember chatting with Sean about one of his difficulties, and I'm sure on the back of that, he learned a lot. And if you want to hear more about Sean's journey from well, he'll introduce himself. Actually, I won't ruin the surprise, but Sean's was a great episode. It's one of the most popular, and he goes into a lot of detail about how he was able to build up his property portfolio with very little cash, and at such a young age as well. But on the back of the podcast, obviously I've had the joy of meeting a lot of great investors, and a few of them have agreed that they will come and give webinars, trainings, live events, whatever you want to call them, on topics that are close to their hearts and to their investing strategies. And this evening, Sean and his business partner, Mike, have thankfully agreed to join us and give us an introduction to Lease Options, which is one of the main strategies that they focus on. So without further ado, Sean, do you want to give yourself a brief introduction and then pass over to Mike? Just, who you are, give us a bit about your background, how you got involved in property investing, and why Lease Options are the strategy that you chose to focus on.
Hi guys, what I'm going to do, we normally do this in the PIN environment. So what I'll do, I'll hand you over to Mike first, because that's the way we normally do it. So it'll just get me out of my flow a little bit if I pick it up now. That's okay.
No problem. Yeah, perfect.
So I'm going to hand you over to Mike.
Pressure's on me now, Mike. Thank you, Mike, first of all, for giving us this opportunity. And it's really a pleasure to be here tonight. And I just want to say at this time, your podcasts have been absolutely fantastic. You've had some great speakers, really influential people. Being an avid listener to see you get going and from where you started to where you are today, it's quite an honour to be asked, to be honest, to be here. So thank you very much for all your hard work and effort that you go to for your listeners. It's grateful. So thank you. And also to the people listening tonight, thank you for giving us your time on such a lovely evening. As we can see, it's a really summer sunny evening. It's a lot of you have come from work, and as soon as you get home, maybe some of you want to relax and chill, and you're giving your time tonight. So we're very grateful for that. Tonight's presentation, the podcast as such, we're going to be talking about 30 minutes, and we're hoping to stick around afterwards so we can answer all your questions. So we're willing to do that. That's not an issue. So don't panic during the present, tonight's sort of podcast. Just remember your questions, get them saved up, and we can answer them later on. Now, obviously you can't see me at the moment, so I'd like you to sort of get familiar to my nice Cheshire sound, and you'll know the difference between myself being Mike and Sean, because Sean's the one that sounds nice and scouse. So a little bit about myself before we I pass over to Sean and we go into tonight's presentation. My background is I'm a builder, been in construction for well over 20 years. And in 2008, yeah, you can guess it, the recession came. And at that point, when the recession comes, builders are the first sort of people that get hit hard. People stop spending money. One of the reasons why they maybe stop spending money as well, especially on extensions and things, is because the facilities to raise finance and money through the banks to do extensions just ceases and just stops. It put me in a very hard time. It caused a split with my partner in the business. We both went separate ways. It put a lot of strain on my married life to a point that it split us up for a little bit. I was at a point of losing the house, and there is a reason for why I'm sharing this with you, and you'll see that as we go through the presentation. But it's just to say that the reason why was massive. I've come from somewhere, I've lost everything, and the way I saw moving forward was to use property as a secure asset, using rental income to replace my income. And what we've been able to do in a very short period of time over the last 3 years is be able to both of us become full-time property investors. We've placed incomes, and it's given us sort of financial freedom and freedom of time to be able to do things like what we're doing tonight. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm going to pass you over to Sean.
Hi guys, thank you, Mike. Okay, so my journey is a little bit different to Mike's. I'm slightly younger than Mike, although he doesn't like me saying that. And I actually started my property journey when I was actually studying in university. And the reason was I realised I didn't want to finish university and get stuck in a 9-to-5 job with no time freedom. So because I've always been quite entrepreneurial, I realised that I just wanted to step out of, that conditioning of a 9-to-5 job. So what I went and done, I went and educated myself in other ways. I went and picked up property books, investment books, and soon realised that property was the way for me to go. And that's when I actually met Mike. I met Mike at a property networking event. We got chatting, we talked a little bit about what we're up to, and we soon realised we actually had quite complementary skills. So we're, as you mentioned quite a couple of times, I've got quite a strong Scouse accent. What that means is sometimes, especially when you're speaking to a southerner, it can work against you a little bit, where Mike is actually really good at negotiating. So when it comes to the negotiation, I would pass it over to Mike, and he would help me out on that side. And then together, we just realised the complementary skills, we could do more deals faster. So when we first started, although we did complement each other's skills, we actually, between the both of us, we couldn't get a mortgage, and we didn't actually start with that much cash. So as you could imagine, it was uphill from the start. But what we like to do is share our journey of how we've actually managed to do it regardless. Okay, great. So first of all, what we want to do is, I'm sure there's probably people who are listening who are new to lease options, and I'm sure there's people listening who are experienced with lease options. I like to get everyone to a level playing field and just briefly go over what a lease and a purchase lease option is. We'll then share the benefits of using leases and purchase lease options compared to buying traditionally. And throughout the presentation, we'll be sharing tips so you can go out and find lease options. We'll also be sharing some examples of properties that we've done in our portfolio. And as mentioned, at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. Okay.
So what we're hoping you can see is a gentleman in front of you. And many of you may not sort of recognise the face, but this gentleman in front of you became not just a very successful businessman, was a very powerful and influential person in his own right. What you will recognise is the name John D. Rockefeller. And for a lot of you, Rockefeller, maybe the first thing that comes to mind is maybe Rockefeller real estate. It's really fitting in tonight's sort of presentation why we've brought him in. And one of the reasons for why we brought him with you is own nothing but control everything. And that really fits in well with what a lease and a lease option is. Own nothing but control everything. I'll give you a little bit of a background of this guy that's in front of you now. He was the world's richest man before he passed away with £663 billion. And he was also the first self-made millionaire to come out of America. And he started his journey in petroleum, believe it or not. And he did this by leasing the ground that he took the oil out of the ground on. So he didn't own the land, he just controlled the land. And as he grew on, he then started to purchase the land. And that's where he started his career. And he obviously, as you can see, the world's richest man. So what I'm going to talk first about is lease and lease options. We're just going to understand what a lease is. A lease is a legal agreement which gives you the control of an asset, and we're talking about property, without actually owning it. And a purchase lease option, which is with the option at the end, is the lease with the right to purchase, but not the obligation to do so. So I'm going to give an example, and hopefully just simplify that example, because I'm sure for many of you, you are all familiar with leasing a car. So it's very similar, except for the vehicle isn't bricks and mortar, the vehicle's an engine and tyres in this case. So the way we do this is that, first of all, we may do a little bit of research and look for the vehicle that we're looking for. This vehicle has to fit the needs of what we need it to do. So if it's a taxi, you may need it to have 6 seats, 6 bedrooms, see the link? Or it could be this, it's just you in your car and you want a little small car, but you go into lease a vehicle. Once you've found the vehicle and you've done your research, you know which car it is that you want to lease, you then go to the right supplier and go to the branch that's selling that vehicle, and then you tie yourself into a contract. That contract will have monthly payments that are set up, and over that period of time, it may be 36 months, or that could be anywhere from up to 5 years of a payment plan that you've signed into over that fixed period. Now, during the time, you're going to replace the tyres, you're going to change the fuel, well, you're going to put fuel in the car, obviously, you're going to change the oil, you're going to maintain the vehicle, and it's up to you to keep the upkeep of that vehicle. The interesting part is the option bit, which is just at the end of the contract. And the option is that you may be given the option to buy the car at the end. And how will that come about? Well, the way that would come about, it may come that in this case, with thinking of a car in mind, it may be that it's subject to so many thousands of miles that you put on the car. The condition that you hand the property back in, you'll know if it's kept within that remit that the car's worth a certain value. And that's just another way, it's just another spin of looking at a lease. Except for the way we're working and the way we're talking tonight, we're doing it with bricks and mortar, but it's exactly the same thing. So I'm hoping for some of you that has simplified it just to understand it and see it in a different light.
Okay, so what I would like to do now is just go through the benefits of leases and purchase lease options. Now, what I like to do is just use an example. So if we were to buy a £100,000 property in today's market, the typical mortgage you would get on a buy-to-let, so loan to value will be 75%. So if we had a £100,000 property, that would mean you could get a £75,000 loan, and you would have to put in a deposit of £25,000. Now, the good thing about leases and lease options is the deposit's negotiable. So what that means is it can be very, very, very low. And in some cases, we've actually only paid £1 deposit. Where in other cases, we've actually paid a couple of £1,000s because that's what the vendor wanted. So just bear that in mind. The deposit is very, very cheap, or in some cases, there's no deposit at all. The second benefit is you do not need a mortgage for lease options. Now, I'm sure there's probably people listening today who are maybe self-employed or for whatever reason may not have clean credit. Well, the good thing about leases and lease options, it doesn't matter because you're not getting a mortgage and you're not going to lenders to ask for finance. All the lease option is, it's just an agreement between you and the vendor. That's it. This falls nicely in with the fact that you're not getting a mortgage, you won't get downvalued. So what I mean by that is if we go back to our £100,000 example, let's say the mortgage surveyor comes out and he says that the property is actually not worth £100,000 and only worth £80,000. That would mean you would have to cover the shortfall. You would have to cover the £20,000 shortfall if you still want to buy that property. That's not going to happen with leases and lease options because there's no mortgage. Finally, and I believe this was actually the most important to myself and Mike when we first started because we needed to replace our income fast. As mentioned, we couldn't get mortgages. We weren't in a perfect position. We didn't have much money. The good thing about leases and lease options, they are quick and they're simple to do. Mortgages can actually take a very, very long time to complete on. And we've actually done a property using a mortgage in the past. And it took, how long did it take, Mike? Was it about 6 months or something? About 6 months to complete on, just because we were waiting on mortgage lenders. So the most important to me on the benefits is it's quick and it's simple. Okay, so what you should be able to see in front of you is case study number 1. And this is just a lease. So we don't actually have the option to purchase this at the end. And the way this come about was by understanding our area. And the way we got to understand our area was by testing demand for tenants. And the way we done that was by putting dummy adverts out into certain postcodes. So what I mean by that is we put fake adverts online. We would put it on the likes of spareroom.com where people look for individual rooms. We put on gumtree.com, Rightmove, and we'll see what the response is in that area. And we soon realised that the best response areas was where we wanted to work. So in this case, for you guys who know Liverpool, this is actually in Egbert, and we found that in Egbert, people were willing to room share, and you could actually achieve a lot of money per room. So the way this come about was I was actually walking the area because I knew that was the area we wanted to invest in. I got to know the properties. I went to a couple of viewings. I understood what the property layouts were typically, and as you can see, this is actually a double bay fronted window. And what that means is there were actually 2 reception rooms either side of that front door. And what we managed to do was convert one of the reception rooms into another bedroom, which meant we could get more rent. And from that, because we knew our area, we could negotiate a better deal with the landlord. The landlord was actually he was a businessman and he wanted to move abroad. and what he realised was he just weren't getting what he wanted from normal management companies, and what we could offer was a lot more powerful because we would take care of bills and maintenance. So I managed to build a rapport with the landlord and the vendor, and we took this on. We offered them £1,000 per month, so for the lease agreement. The deposit in this case was actually zero, but what we had to do was put £2,000 in for just bits of furniture and just a light tidy up of the property. It was already HMO. For you guys who don't know what that means, that's House of Multiple Occupancy Standards. So it already had the right fire alarms and the right emergency lighting and everything else. So we didn't need to put any cost in for that. And then the rental income that we achieve is £2,750. Now, what that is, it's about £370 per room. And then if you notice on the top, there's actually three windows, three Felix windows. That top is actually a self-contained flat, although you have to walk through the property to get to it. So we rent that out for slightly more at £450, all bills included. So at the end, on that property, our total cash flow per month is £1,000. Now, I'm sure a couple of you sitting there wanting one of those.
Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point now is just run over maybe a few key points, because what Sean's brought up there's some real golden nuggets in there. And I just want to make sure that maybe some of you have got them. So one of the first things that I'm going to share with you tonight is that obviously Sean shared with us how he found the property and how it came about. And that was because we'd done the research to know which areas had high demand and which areas we wanted to gain assets in, and which postcodes they fell in. So obviously when Sean's walking around, one of the things that stood out the most to Sean was that it had a to let board. But what was interesting outside this property, it also had for sale. So when you see a property that has to let for sale, this is sort of telling us that I'm going to say it's a neon light, but it's sort of saying there's motivation. Something's happened. Something's not quite right going on in the background. The vendor's obviously got paying. He's obviously got a mortgage to pay. And there's also council tax that he's paying, and he's got to cover these bills. So you going with your asset, your strategy, if we want to call it lease and lease options, this is a great way for you to be able to go in and approach it, because obviously he's looking to sell it, but he's also interested in letting the property. And you're coming with both those solutions for him, where you can let the property, give him a great return on his property, guaranteed, build up a nice rapport with the homeowner as well, and obviously secure the opportunity for you to purchase the property. And, you know, don't get too fixed up. I know a few people come to us and say, oh, I won't do a lease, well, because I've not had the option to buy it. You know, in this example, what Sean was showing was that this was just a lease. So all we were doing was leasing the property out and then leasing the rooms by room and making the money through the many bedrooms that are in there. The important thing on this is build rapport. Now, the reason why that's really important is because the actual rapport that we built with this gentleman, we're nearly 4 years into this property and he's asked us to buy it. Now, that's interesting, because many people get caught out and think, oh, I've got to get the option on the house. And you don't, because if you think about it, this is a long-term working relationship. And I only like to work people that I get on well with. And I get on well with all the landlords or the homeowners that we lease our properties through. And I find that that's an important value to me, that I like to be able to pick the phone up and just talk to them and have a conversation. And even to the point, you know, if they want to come and have a coffee, we have that coffee. But what it means is we've built the trust up over the last 3.5 years during this property. When he came to sell it, the interesting thing was, who did he come to first? He came to us. And it was so much easier to negotiate a deal or negotiate on the price and talk about it, because we'd already built the trust and the relationship there anyway. So, you know, the second key point on this is build rapport. The also important thing is know your area, know property before walking in. There's a few things here that Sean said that it's a bit like buying your first house. Because when you buy your first house or when you're moving house, sometimes you're a bit like a stalker, and you'll turn up on the road at 12 o'clock because you want to know what type of people walk past the house at midnight and what's the road like. Well, they're the sort of things that you need to be doing, but not stalking anybody, or maybe not even having to turn up at midnight, but just know the street and maybe do a few few viewings on a few properties in that area just to get an idea of what the houses look like. And it's important because if you know your area and you know the demand and you know you can let these properly, you know, and quickly, so your voids are going to be small, you can really go in and offer a great fixed fee, you know. And in this example that Sean showed, it was £1,000 a month. That's more than a single let that you would get. It's well more, and we've created a win-win scenario. You know, we've not had to negotiate a deal because we came up with a very, very fair offer. We were confident with our numbers. It just worked for him straight away.
Mike, we've had a couple of questions on this case study, so maybe we can address them now before we move on to the next one.
Perfect, Mike. Yeah.
So firstly, Scott is asked, he's trying to understand the incentive to the landlord for doing this, why he didn't just rent it out himself. He was asking if there were any problems with the property and if he needed to do any work to it before it was able to be let out. Okay,
so to answer that, there's two parts to that, because what we've said is the incentive to the landlord, and also what type of property was it, you know. And well, this property was already set up as what we call a HMO, which is a house of multiple occupancy, which is a council government regulation that's needed when you have a property that's got more than 5 bedrooms over 3 or more floors. It has to be licensed, and it's licensed for a good reason. This is because, you know, you want to be able to sleep at night. You know, within there, what you've got is systems. They need to see that the property's well managed, well looked after. The people who are managing it, us, are capable of managing it. They need to see that there's fire doors, smoke alarms, just common sense things really that you would want in a house where there's multiple occupancy people, and to see that you've got these type of systems in there. This house was already set up. Now, when I said do your research before, this was one of the things that we looked for. So we knew that this was a HMO already, and that's why it ticked the box. So that's why we went in to that property. Now, the incentive for the landlord, there's a few, to be honest, and we could do a list. I mean, one of them is that sometimes landlords are just tired landlords. They're fed up. We've met many landlords that don't particularly want to sell the property. They bought it as an investment. They're getting a bit older. They've managed their own portfolio, but they're just tired. They've been let down by letting agents. Now, one of the things, a common theme with people who lease, multi-lets and lease options as such, is they seem to manage their own properties themselves. This seems to be a common theme. I mean, one of the main reasons is that because it saves a bit on the cash flow for yourself. But lettings agents, and I'm not giving letting agents bad names, because there's certainly a lot of good letting agents out there as well. But we find sometimes that the landlords that are coming to us are just ready for a change. They've been with another letting agent. We actually sort of quite unique, because we specialize in something that's really not out there on the marketplace, and that's individual bedrooms, leasing rooms by room by room. We don't actually normally always take, although letting agents maybe take on properties where they're working with blocks of students or blocks of professional workers. We're actually just working, you know, letting a room, one individual person. That's quite unique, and it takes a lot of management to do that. So the motivation behind the landlord is that we come to him with the solutions. And in this case, I suppose, if I go back to, there was a for sale sign and a to let board, that was his motivation. I would dare say that he was trying to let it. He struggled to let the property, and it didn't need that much work doing to it. I mean, it's only £2,000. It was a lick of paint, in all fairness. And he just got fed up and decided he wanted to sell it. But in all fairness, when an agency tries to sell a house as well, they always up the house price. They're always trying to give you something. They tell you what you want to hear. And the asking price was far too high, and that's why he wasn't getting it. And once someone's told you what something's worth, you believe that. And sometimes, you know, in this case, he was hanging on to that sort of value of the house. So I hope that answers the question.
I'm sure it does, Mike. And just in follow up to that, when you're talking about the agents, Paul has asked if you went through the agents or did you go direct to the vendor on this one?
Yeah, so in this case, the way it worked, I actually called the agents up directly, and it just so happened that the agent were local. They were actually based in Manchester, and obviously this property is in Liverpool. So what happened was they actually put us directly in touch with the with the landlord. So on the viewing, I got to meet the landlord, and that also meant I could build rapport over the viewing, which was quite nice. And it turned out in this scenario that the owner of the property is actually a business owner. So when it came to explaining, obviously, we're going to take on this property and then we're going to sublet it, we're going to rent out room by room. We told him exactly what we were looking to do. He understood it completely, because he's got a business, and in his business he would do leases and lease options, but just in a different light as such. So just it worked really well for this landlord, because his intention was actually he wanted to go and move abroad, and as Mike mentioned earlier, management agencies just weren't meeting his expectations. So obviously when we came in and said we'll take care of all maintenance, bills, void, you're not going to get a call Christmas Eve to say that the toilet's leaking, not working, or anything like that, because we'll take care of it all. That really appealed to him, and as Mike's also mentioned, what we're offering is what he could probably achieve on a single let anyway. So £1,000 per month for this property. If he was to rent it to a family, that's how much he would achieve anyway. So we would actually more than meet his expectations.
And in general, do you find that when you need to go through estate and letting agents, obviously you can't always go direct to vendor, have the estate agents been receptive, or are they normally a stumbling block?
Yeah, so just to answer your question, because I actually went on a bit of a tantrum there. Yeah, so to answer the question, when working with agents, not all the time you're going to find an agent that wants to work with you. That's the truth. However, we have found that there's certain ways that you can negotiate and approach an agent to get a better result, and are more likely to get a result. And the way we found that agents do work for us, now it weren't the case in this scenario, because we did get to go direct. But when we are going through an agent, the way we would do it is we would ask the agent what do they want from it. So do they want to get a management fee? Do they want to get a lettings fee? What is it they want? And then once we know what they want, we can then put it in our numbers and see if it works and see if it stacks up. So if I give you an example, on another one of our properties, what the agent wanted was just a little bit of commission, because it was actually up for sale. So if he was going to sell that property, he would get, the 1% commission. That's normal for estate agents. So what we offered was, we would give him that 1% commission, and the way we would do it is we'll for funds in this example is £2,000. In the other example, I think it was a little bit more, because we paid the agent's commission. But we just met what the agent wanted, and it's just a win-win for everyone.
Mike, if I can add to that, just for everyone listening, what's really interesting working with agents is, I'm going to say this is one of the hardest things to do, but it's the most rewarding, building your network with your agents. Now, what we found works better is small independent agents than the big national companies. Because the big national companies, people sit behind the desks, most of them have to ask and go and see their manager. They can't. They're not. I don't mean it in a negative way, but there's a system behind them, and they're not really sometimes allowed to think out that box. And if it doesn't sort of work on their computer says no.
Yeah.
And a few of the agents that we've worked with now are smaller letting agents, have huge portfolios that they manage, but they're entrepreneurs themselves, because they're running their own business, so they get it. And we've actually found that through it, most of the time we've not really had to really pay many fees or anything, because once you build that relationship up and you keep talking to them, and I'm going to give you a great example, and our next example is just that case, is that you're solving a problem that is theirs, and their problem is that they're trying to do something for their client, being the landlord, and they're struggling to let that property, and you're coming along with something that they don't do. So you're not taking anything away from them, you're presenting yourself in a professional manner, you've got a solution that sometimes they just link you up with the vendor, and you build on, and that vendor's dead happy, they've got a happy client, and sometimes and for definitely two agencies that we work with now, it's just a case of scratching each other's backs. If we get people asking us, oh, can we manage some single lets, and we go, no, that's not what we do, but I know just the agent that'll do that. And it's about giving and receiving, but it takes time with agents. I mean, just another spin working with agents is that if you do manage to get into a branch who's a larger branch, or even smaller ones where they've got maybe a couple of staff, what you do find is in letting agents is that the sort of staff, they turn over fairly quickly. But if you've built that relationship with that colleague in that agency, and when he goes to his next agency, well, he'll take your details and he knows about you, and you've actually now just found another agency. And that's happened in 3 agents with us, where the lads have moved over to different companies, but they've kept our details and have known us, and then we've been able to tap into another agency. So that's powerful as well, but it does take time to build up the relationships with agents. That's one thing I will say.
Great stuff. And I love that point that you made there. It's not just about it being a win-win between you and the landlord. The agent can also get a win out of it as well, because you're offering something that they don't necessarily offer. Now, you mentioned that the next case study talks a bit about that. So there are a few other questions, but will we move on to this next case study before we look at those other questions?
Fine. Fantastic. Yeah, we did that. Okay, so the second case study tonight, what we're looking at now is the lease option. So the first one that Sean talked to you about was just the lease. We're actually, with this property, we've actually secured the option at the beginning. So a little bit about this property. It's in a lovely place for those that know Bootle. And I can see a few people, or maybe even a few people giggling in the background if they know where Bootle is, because they'll know I'm lying. And the way this came about was that I followed up. And I know some of you are nodding your heads now going, yes, I know, I do that. But seriously, it's a very powerful thing. You know, no's become yeses. No's are just yeses for later. And you've probably heard that before as well. And with this agency, I just picked up the phone. It was just one of those sort of follow-up phone calls. How are you? The agency actually, I knew from a networking event, and we'd met a few times in a networking event. And he, to be honest, he didn't quite get what we did. And I suppose at the very beginning of our journey, maybe we sometimes maybe have come across as confusing it a little bit. But on this day, I picked up the phone and I just said to him, you know, hi Mark, how are you? And he said, oh, he said, I'm having a, you know, he was having a nightmare of a day. He said one of his properties that he had just been smashed in by the police, and the property had been raided. Basically, he said that it's out of our area. Bootle's just a little bit too far out. We're constantly at the property. We're constantly doing viewings. The tenants are in and out. It's just a pain. The landlord's from London. We can't manage it properly. We haven't got the time to put in. He said, and I'm now having to ring up and get someone in to board the windows. And I said, you know what, Mark? I said, I'll come and do that. You know, it was luckily for me, you know, my skills are a joiner. I said, I'll come down to the property, and if you want the lift, I'll come and help you. And he said, tell you what, I'll see you down, see you at the, you know, and he was grateful for that. So I met him at the property, and I was lucky enough to be able to have a quick scout around the property and see what had gone on. And the sort of story behind why the police had raided the property was, now bear with me on this, there was a shooting the weekend before, and someone had been shot, and they suspected that type of tenant was in this property. So the police raided the property, and what they were looking for was the gun. Luckily, they never found it. We've got it, and from that day, all our negotiations go on spot on. We have no problems. Everyone says yes to the option. So that's a bit of a joke in a part there, really, but that's what they were looking for, and they did cause quite a bit of damage. They'd kicked all the doors in, things like stud walls. They'd smashed the stud walls in. Anywhere where there was boxing for pipes, they were smashing the boxing out. Anywhere where someone could hide a gun. But the problem with this was, which we were able to see very quickly, was that the type of tenant that was in there, the type of tenant in there was the age of sort of 18 to 23. Type of tenant that at 18, 23 in that area, probably they have 3 mobile phones, and one's for, you know, selling things that they shouldn't be selling. And they just move around so quickly. And we saw an opportunity here, because this makeup of this unit is 1 shop and 4 bedrooms. Now, the DIY flats. Sorry, yes, so 4 flats. Sorry, I stand corrected. Sorry. So it's 1 shop and 4 1-bedroom flats. Now, because of what was going on, the DIY shop, was able to go in there. We were able to get the ply from them to do the windows and the doors. And I realised that the business owner down there was really, really nice. He was more than forthcoming to want to help us out. I knew that he was good. The four self-contained flats, self-contained flats. The opportunity there, I thought, was that we could put people in who are a little bit older. And what that meant was that if you put somebody over the age of 35 in a one-bedroom flat, what it means is that the rent that you come in is about $362 every 4 weeks, or £400 a month, depending on how you want to look at it. So we knew that there was great potential in actually the rental income in this property, and what that rental income was £2,035, including the sort of the shop rental coming in. And I just turned around to the agent and said, "Do you know what? We could take this off your hands, and I think I could make a go at this." And he said, "Well," he said, "it needs some work doing, and I'm not quite sure if the vendor will be happy." And I said, "But we'll put the money in, and we'll give guaranteed rent, and we'd actually buy it off her if it's becoming such a problem." What was interesting, he gave us the keys because he trusted us anyway, and I knew him from a networking event. And the actual deal was, I want to say, closed and sealed through a Skype call, just like this, where I Skyped the landlady who lives in London. Now, the important thing here is that the lead came from the agent. So she'd already trusted the agent with her portfolio of other properties. So me meeting the criteria of her and the expectations was already exceeded, because they were referring me as someone who they would trust to take over this property. And that's exactly what we did. We brought an investor in from a networking event, and he was able to fund the £5,000. And we had the lease term for over 3 years, and the option at the end of 3 years. The option to buy this property is, I think it's £83,000, and it's coming close to committing on that option. The lease agreement in here is that we pay the landlady £900 per calendar month. We take care of the whole property. What's really good here with the self-contained flats is that we don't have to get caught up with bills, because they pay for their own bills. So it's sort of the total sort of cash flow on this on a monthly basis. It's saying on here is £1,135. Let's call it £1,000 a month for argument's sake. But it cash flows well, and it's probably one of the best properties as well, because it really takes care of itself. Just to go back to the tenants that we put in over the age of 35, what worked really, really well for us was because they're over age of 35 and they're not 2 beds, they're 1 beds. If it was 2 beds, it might be partners, and then it might be that they're bringing kids, and that might cause more complications. But these are just 1-bedroom flats, so it's just one person coming in, and you normally find that one person at that point, they're just been divorced. They just want to get their heads down. They just want to work. They're no either. And for the last 2 years, we've still got the same tenants that moved in from day one. So it's been a good example of just how long the tenants have been in and how well this property's worked for us.
Okay, so just to go over some key points. So as Mike mentioned very early on in that case study, was to follow up. Now, we're sure you've heard this before. I mean, we're not standing here, we've made this up. I'm absolutely sure that you've heard this before. Follow up, follow up, follow up. It's so important. And as Mike mentioned, the way this come about was actually he followed up with the agent, and it just so happened to be the right day. It was the day after this place got raided by the police. So we called just at the right time. So it's so important to follow up, because you never know what the other person's circumstances are on the other end of the phone. The second key point is we've changed the tenants, and just by identifying how we could solve the issue, it weren't necessarily something structural or something to do with the actual property itself. It was just the fact that you were putting the wrong tenants in, and because we identified that if you put the right tenants in, it'd probably be a nice property, that's worked perfectly for us. And finally, as mentioned, leases and lease options are very quick and easy to do, and we actually done this on Skype. So if you could imagine, the way this worked was Mike actually had a Skype call with the landlady in London, and then sent the lease option agreement electronically via a thing called EchoSign, and the landlady actually sent it back within 24 hours. So we had this deal done and dusted within 24 hours. So lease options are so powerful, And I know for a fact that even if you were buying with cash on this property, you wouldn't complete within 24 hours. And this is one of the powerful things about leases and lease options. You really can go from nothing to something within a very short space of time. Okay, so do we have a couple questions on this at all, Mike, or shall we just carry on through the presentation?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions, Sean. So one thing that has been asked, and I guess it's a bit of a concern about lease options and rent to rent generally. I asked a question about it on one of the Facebook groups recently and got a couple of great responses, but someone else has asked it tonight, and it's good just to alleviate these concerns. So do you, when you're trying to set up lease options, what level of detail do you go into with the current owner or landlord about their mortgage terms to make sure that the mortgage company are happy with what you're doing with the property?
That's a very, very good question. Now, it's a lot easier when it's a commercial property and it's done with commercial finance. So, for example, the first example, the HMO, that was already a commercial lender. They were already familiar with sort of letting to students or sort of room lets. That's how the property value works. That's how they get a valuation on the property. So they're familiar with that, and that wasn't an issue at all. With this property, again, it is sort of commercial. The landlady on this, her business actually is insurance, so she sort of understands sort of the insurance side and what she legally needs to fall in line with. Mortgage providers, if we've found that we've not had any hiccups, and we do tell them to, you know, speak to your mortgage advisor or your lenders, let them know what we're doing. And we've been, you know, maybe we've just been lucky. It's a question that's come up many times, Mike. Sometimes you can change the name on the contract and call it a management, and that's all you need to do. It's change the contract from a lease to a management, so you become the management agent, but the content of the lease is exactly the same. It's just that it's got management across the top, and that's enough for some of the lenders to work with. But in most cases, we found anyway, the fact that you're offering a long-term let, guaranteed rental income, it's reducing the risk in my eyes. So, and I would dare say that's probably the same for the lenders, that the risk is reduced. It would depend on, and one of the questions I suppose is a difference, type of people that are moving into the property. So if you're taking on a lease, but then it could be asylum seekers, that's maybe part of what the lender won't lend with, and that's a stipulation. So it could just depend that you're falling into a category that lender's not happy to do. Some lenders, especially buy-to-let lenders, sometimes don't, believe it or not, like sort of housing benefit type people, LHA, which is strange because that's the marketplace we were for. You know, we're in most cases, and definitely sort of 96% of our portfolio is professional lets. It's young working professionals. And them being professionals, it sort of stands out there that it's professional all the way through, from the tenants to the business.
Yeah, I think that answers the question well, and there are probably two things that are worth pulling out of that, Mike. Firstly, that it is important that you get the landlord to check with their mortgage company. I guess the onus is on them, and you want to make sure that they are doing that. And also, whilst you're saying that it is easy to find lease options and it's a great way to make money without a huge amount of capital invested, it is still a legal agreement you have in place with these, and it's not the type of thing you'd want to go and write out. I assume you guys have spent a lot of time getting your contracts and your agreements drafted up, make sure that they're bulletproof. You know, you've had your solicitors look over them, if not write them. Yep. And having that paperwork in place is as important as how you actually find the lease options.
It is, very much so. To that, really, I mean, we've got a standard formatted lease, and we don't necessarily need to take that to the solicitor every time we draw up a lease, because even he said himself, there's no need. But for those that are new and starting out, you definitely want to be doing this through a solicitor, and you want to be looking at finding not just one solicitor, you know, maybe maybe two or three. And it's always good that maybe you can recommend a solicitor for them to work with, and have two solicitors that potentially know each other and understand lease and lease options. There's nothing worse than finding a solicitor, or you having your solicitor who knows what he's doing. He's sending over the contract to the other solicitor, and they're trying to change it every 5 minutes because they don't understand lease options. They're not familiar with them. And it does happen, and it just means that your time with your solicitor costs you more money, because obviously they work on a stop clock as such, so you're paying for their time. I hope that's of some value, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was one other question. Actually, there's two more. We'll maybe do one now and then leave the other one until the next case study. But someone's asked about using agents. They like the appeal of lease options because, well, I mean, with property investing generally, a lot of the appeal is about passive income. And one of the things I ask each of our guests is how passive the income actually is. And in a lot of cases, people get into it thinking, oh, I'm going to be lying on the beach every day and the money's going to pour in. That's not always the case. But with lease options specifically, the question is, are you managing them yourselves, or are you using an agent? Because it sounds like Scott would rather have a bit more of a passive income and have less of an income by paying someone else to do it rather than manage them himself. He doesn't want to replace one job with another.
Yeah, it's a good question. To answer that, we do manage our properties ourselves. But what happened was, when we first started, we took a lot of time to set up the systems in place. So myself and Mike, we don't actually spend much time on management now, if we're completely honest, because we've systemized it so well. But to answer your question, if you did want to work with agents and just get them to manage it, then by all means do so, because the good thing is about these case studies and the properties that we do and we look for, there is enough in it to also give some money away to an agent to manage. We just found when we first started, as mentioned, we did have very little funds, so we thought we want to keep as much money as we can to ourselves, and that's when we set up the systems to obviously free up our time.
Just one on that, Mike. Sorry, Sean, to cut in there, but just depending on what you're looking to do, because everybody has different sort of reasons for doing property, and it means different things. And some of you maybe are looking to have this make you come financially free, give up your job as such, and do this full time. And some of you want to just do a couple of properties, increase the cash flow. Just means you can have your holidays and your nice car, and you're still working full time. And any one of those is right, I suppose.
It's possible.
Yeah, it's possible.
It's entirely up to you. If you want to keep hold of all the income yourself when you're first starting, or if you want to give 10 to 15% away to the agent.
What it's been able to help us with, and that wasn't our initial intention, it was more cash flow orientated. But because we've managed our own portfolio, it's helped us understand the systems that we've needed to change and adapt, and what didn't work well, what does work well, and understand the requirements of what we would expect from an agency. So maybe if it is you're doing a lease option on a multiple house of multiple occupancy, it may be good for you to get involved in the first one or two, just so that you really get to feel and understand how they work, because then you're probably going to find the right agent because you know what you're expecting from them. But you can ask the right questions.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so just on to the next slide. So we just flick through the key points. Okay, so for every lease or lease option that we take on, we have guidelines, and by all means, feel free to take these guidelines for yourselves, or you can adapt and you can change them. But just to go through them, one of our first guidelines is any input cost. So in those two case studies, you've seen that we put £2,000 and £5,000 in. Now, any input cost that we put in, we always want to get it out within 12 months from the rent. So what that means is it's a minimum 100% return on investment. So the way we'll do that in a lot of cases is we'll negotiate on the rent. For the first year, we'll maybe knock it down a little bit, or we'll maybe negotiate a couple of months rent free, which brings us on to the third bullet point at the bottom there. We'd always try and negotiate for 3 months rent free, because what would that would mean our return on investment is slightly higher. And our other rule of thumb is, as mentioned, and I keep on mentioning it, lease options are quick and simple. And there's a reason we only want to put £10,000 in maximum for each opportunity. And that reason is it's not going to be quick and simple if you're spending more than £10,000 on a property to get it right. So just to go through those rule of thumbs again, is the first one is we don't want to put input cost in that will take longer than 12 months to get out. We don't want to put more than £10,000 into any opportunity, even if we could get it back within 12 months, just because it's just too much hassle. It's too much managing builders and everything else. And finally, we would always try and negotiate 3 months rent free. Now, if we're completely honest, that's not always been the case. We've not always negotiated 3 months rent free, but we always position that to the owner, and we always ask, and a lot of the times we do get a yes straight away. So just bear that in mind. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Okay, so this brings us to working with investors. I think this is probably one of the most important slides in the presentation tonight, because we wouldn't be where we are today without the people who supported us, and they'd be our investors. And as we mentioned before, from when we started, there wasn't much funds to move with anyway, and it doesn't matter where you are on the scale of investing. Some of the bigger investors, they always run out of money, so you need to be able to find people to work with. So the reason why we bring this in, because this is the cogs of the business, this is the back end, and this is what really helped us move forward. We were able to work with investors. Now, for an example, some of you may be sort of listening, just going, oh, well, who's an investor? It could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a work colleague, it could be that you go to networking events and they're in there. You know, the networking events work really, really well, but it's about building rapport. Again, it's a bit like working with the agents. You can't just go in and walk out the door and expect to get a deal. You may have to go in a few times. You may have to make an effort to stand out, to them to want to know you and be with you and trust you and find you. And that's really important, because you know, the deal where there was the £5,000 going in, that investor actually, we just told him what we were doing, and he you know, it was very simple. He just said to us, guys, what you up to, where you up to? And we said, oh, we've just secured this, we're looking for funds. And straight away he said, well, I could help you with that. You know, and it wasn't so much the return on the investment, because I mean, it's £5,000, so the return on, I'm not going to say it's a small amount of money, because it's not, it's a huge amount of money, but in property terms, we talk about big numbers and we get carried away with these big numbers. But the return wasn't the beneficial reason for it. It's because what he wanted to do was come and watch over our shoulders, have a live experience. He wants to be able to kick the walls. And I mean, one of the things that the investor wanted to do was to learn how to plaster, which was quite bizarre, you know. So I had to get my tools out and show him how to plaster. Interesting that, you know, he doesn't do any work, and all his properties now are sort of armchair investments. But it just goes to show that, you know, there's more to it than just a return on investment. The other good thing about investors when working on leases and lease options is that you don't need to put high amounts of money in. So we're not talking of deposits where you need 20, 30, 40,000 to go into the property. We're talking, in most cases, and we've never gone over the 10K anyway because of the time that it takes to turn that over. But you're mainly talking maybe £2,000 to £6,000, depending on how much furniture you've got to do, if the HMO license needs redoing, bit of painting, decorators, your gas certs. And most people around you will have that sort of money. And it's easier to start your property journey in that area of investment level. As we've grown, so have our investors, you know, and the investors are now opening up, and we're lending bigger sums of money now, but we're doing bigger things. So it's all around, you know, as you've heard tonight in the presentation about building rapport, you know, it's long term, not short term. Our investors are getting live experience with us.
Yeah, I think the reason we put this slide in was just to reiterate how, if you are sitting here with very little funds or no funds at all, because when I first started, I was a student, I was actually in debt. I actually lived on my student loan. So if you could imagine, I didn't have £2 to rub together. So if you are sitting there with very small funds, what we're trying to show you is there's a way you can still invest in property no matter what. And whatever excuse you have right now, it's just an excuse.
Okay, so just what I'd like you to do at the moment now is I just want you to have, for those that are listening, just just give yourself a couple of seconds just to think about the two examples that we've given. Tonight we've given two examples that cash flow up to £2,000. And what could £2,000 mean in your life? What could you do with that? If you had an extra £2,000 a month coming into your bank every month, that's pure cash flow. That's for you to do something with. What would you do with it? Just take a second just to think about what that means to you. I'm hoping that some of you maybe just wrote a few things. That could be that you want to pay more off the mortgage if you've got a mortgage, that you want to do more holidays, or you want to save for your families or your children's education further on. It could be that you want to help your mum and dad. It could, but the possibilities of what it could do for you is great. Now, with those two properties, you could still be working full time, or it could allow you to come out of your job and use that as your full-time income. So the possibilities are great, but what's your motivation? Because behind all this, to succeed, property is not easy. It's hard. It's even harder if you're on your own. And this is why I think credit to Mike putting this webinar together, because it allows you to be sharing your journey with like-minded, positive attitude, people who've got positive attitudes, that just picks up your belief. And you come away from things like this, the podcast, and hope, and networking events that are property related, and come away inspired. You're rubbing shoulders with people that can actually help you if you've got problems, or you need to discuss something. So these type of places are great to give you the kick up the bum to keep going. But you do need a reason why. And I can't give you a stronger reason why when someone's telling you they're going to take the house off you. You don't know where your next cash, your next monthly wage is coming, and your family's about to leave you. That really does give you a wake-up call. And it did for me. And what it's done for me, our portfolio is a lot bigger than just the two that we've shown you, but it's allowed me freedom of time to do the things that I love, and that's being with my family and spending more time with them.
Yeah, and one of my reasons why was, as I mentioned earlier on, is I just wanted the time freedom to go and travel and do other things. Well, actually, last year I spent 6 months of the year traveling Southeast Asia, so you can actually see my back on a rock.
Shorts on.
But we both had very strong reason whys, because that's what got us through the tough time. Because if we are being honest, this is not easy, but it's doable.
So it brings us to the end, and we are going to stick around to answer any questions. And if we've maybe gone over time, I'm hoping that it's been worth it for everybody, and they're taking great values. And we sort of said at the beginning that there's an opportunity for maybe you to come alongside and work with us. And we've actually got on the 4th of July, Independence Day, and it could be your independence. We're doing a day's course on HMOs, which has been tonight's topic, and we should all know that a HMO now is a house of multiple occupancy. And we're going to talk through that through leases and lease options. What we're going to share on the day is to show you where to find these opportunities, how to raise the money, how to negotiate and talk to the agents, to the vendor, how to maximize the profit, how to know how to do your research, tenant demand, and more importantly, two very main important things. One is the legal paperwork. We will give you on the day our lease that you can take away and use. However, I would say to you, as you're starting off, maybe to build that relationship with the solicitor, you can show it to the solicitor. They can do any small amendments that if they wish to, and then you can use that. But we're going to give you all that paperwork as well to help you on the day. So if you'd like to come and join us on the day, and also maybe have the opportunity, not just from the day, but to have continued support, that's something else that we're more than happy to do. There's no VAT on this course. It's $297, and if you do want to come and join us on the day, you'd be more than welcome, and it'd be a pleasure to have you with us.
Okay, perfect, guys. Well, thank you both very much for sharing all of that. A lot of great insight there. We do have quite a few questions, so hopefully you're okay to hang around for a little while. And I mean, just on this course, obviously, I've spoken to you guys about it. I'm going to come along and get the most out of this as well, because I feel like lease options are a huge gap in my knowledge at the moment, and I can't wait to be at this day on the 4th of July. And I think one of the great things, obviously, you're both living and breathing lease options on a daily basis. You're not trainers, you're not educators, you are lease option investors, and learning from people doing it day in, day out is going to be far more beneficial than trying to, going along to some of the training courses where the people have never done lease options on their own. Obviously, Sean and Mike have done over 100 deals now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and in quite a short period of time as well. So I think not only do they know what they're talking about, they show that it's possible, and they show that the volume that you can get to with a little bit of hard work and perseverance. So I think these are the details up on the screen now. How you can get onto the course. You've got the phone number there, and you've got Sean's email address as well. And Sean, basically, they can just get in touch with you and say they're interested, and you'll sort them out with the details. There are a couple of places left. I know it's quite soon, but there are a few spots left, aren't there?
Yes, there is. We had to move venue quite recently because we had kind of an influx of people wanting to join us. So we've actually moved venue now. So it does mean that there is a couple more spaces. So if you are interested, we do work on a first come, first served basis. So please do just drop us an email, and then I'll get the details across to you yourselves. Okay,
perfect. Well, like I say, there are a couple other questions. Now, one that Anthony asked a few minutes ago, it was when you were talking about Bootle, actually. Is it always the less desirable areas where lease option opportunities come up?
Not at all. I think, well, the majority of our portfolio is actually in probably one of the best areas of Liverpool, which is Egbert. So to answer the question, I would say not at all. I mean, it all depends on what your strategy is. Do you want to work on a single let basis? Do you want to work on HMOs? Do you want to work to LHA professionals? What we found is we wanted to work and aim mainly towards professionals, and we've grew our portfolio in those type of places where they want to live. So to answer the question is, these opportunities are everywhere. It's not just the less desirable areas as such.
Okay, perfect. And quite a specific one here from Paul about the structure of the fees. When you're negotiating with the landlord or the property owner, do you normally pay their solicitor fees, or do you ask that they pay them themselves?
Good question. Sorry, good question. And I just go back and say to Paul possibly here is say, what would you like to do? And that's it, because a lease is a blank piece of paper. Yes, behind the lease there's all the legalities of how you conduct yourself and how you're going to look after the paper. But the actual terms of the lease and how it's put together is a blank piece of paper, and it's how you want to work with them. If saying that you're going to pay for their legal fees is what you feel is it crunches the deal and makes the deal for them, then do it. What we found at the very beginning of our journey, that we were offering possibly too much, being very open and honest. We were very excited to be able to do a lease option, and we cover everything. We do absolutely everything, and we've learned from that actually just by doing this form of strategy, by covering their rent and more, and over a long period of time, is all they're actually after. They just want a guaranteed income, because that's what every landlord does when they come into property. Your true investor in all your properties is the tenant. Because if the tenant doesn't pay, you can't pay your mortgage, and you don't get paid. So, for us to be able to come there and say, well, we can provide that demand for the next 5 years, say, depending on the term of the lease, it works well for everybody.
Yeah, I would actually, just to answer that question in more depth a little bit, I don't think we've actually ever paid for a vendor's legal fees.
No, we haven't. No.
Because we've just never said to them, we're going to pay for your legal fees. They just assume that they should pay for it. And to be honest, they probably feel better if they pay for it themselves, because they feel as though they're getting it done by the person of their choice and everything else that goes with that.
If the vendor comes to you and asks that, and that's a criteria for them, then it's entirely up to you. You know, on the back end of that, maybe what you'll say is you want 3 months free rent. Well, if you're getting 3 months free rent, you can afford very easily to pay for his legal fees, and it'll not actually cost you anything because you've got it in the free time. Hopefully, you've turned the property over quick enough in those 3 months to actually bring some income in the free period of time. And that's one of the benefits of asking for that sort of free time.
Yeah, it really is a blank sheet of paper, and that is the important thing to keep in mind when you're doing these deals. That, as Mike said, there are specific legalities you need in your lease option agreement, but other than that, you can basically put in whatever you want that makes the deal appealing to yourself and to the landlord. Because remember, it always comes back to getting that win-win. If the landlord doesn't feel like they're getting what they need out of it, then it's going to be much more difficult to get those lease options signed up. So always look for that win-win and put whatever you want in that's going to help you both get to that. Now, the next question is about the amount of work that you tend to look for in lease options. Do you specifically look for property that requires work before you let it out, or do you take on properties that don't need any work done as well?
In a perfect world, and in all fairness, we have had one of these where the landlord just was expanding his own business. He was ready to let the property, and he was going to go. He was either going to do it himself. He was very experienced, or he was going to go to an agent to do it. He was possibly looking to get a block of students or something like that. It was everything was absolute. You know, it was at that point probably one of the best properties we had in our portfolio because it was just all fresh, all been done. And we managed to speak to him, and actually that came through an agent. The agent said, these guys do this, maybe you want to speak to them. I got to see him, and in fact, thinking about it, it was a different property that we looked at, and it didn't work because it was a 4-bed that they took us to, and there wasn't enough money in a 4-bed for us to be able to offer the landlord a nice wedge of money per month and us have a safety net and get something out of it. It didn't work. And then when he sort of said, well, what size properties do work? And we said sort of 6 to 8 beds are great. He presented this, I think it's a 7-bed property. And we didn't have to do anything to it. So in a perfect world, they are there. But a lot of the time we find that some of the properties are just a little bit tired. As I mentioned, tired landlord. They've probably had the property let, struggled to let it again. And it needs a bit of money in it, and the landlord's feeling a bit down, going, I've got to put more money into this, it's not making me any money. And if you're coming up and saying, not only will we give you a guaranteed rent, we can also talk about buying this property off you, but we're happy to put the money in, subject to a few terms and conditions that we're going to discuss. That's certainly a win-win. If you were in the landlord's shoes, I think you'd be saying yes. So,
yeah, absolutely. And Paul has asked a question: if you're mainly targeting HMOs when you're doing lease options, and I guess my perspective on this, just before I hand it over to you guys to answer this, I've interviewed a lot of people who do lease options, and they're not all looking for HMOs. A lot of them are looking for HMOs because obviously you can pay the market rent for a single let, and then you can make your money by renting out on a room by room basis, and that's a fantastic strategy. Some people are doing very well with lease options purely through single lets because the landlord is tired, they're fed up, maybe they don't have a mortgage on the property, so all they want is a couple £100 a month with the ideal that they're going to sell their property a few years down the line, and you can make it by agreeing to rent it from them below market value and renting it out at the single let market value and still make money. And then yet another strategy that I was speaking to a guy called Paul Smith, and his interview's coming out tomorrow if you want to catch up with this one. He was talking about serviced apartments, and it blew my mind what he was doing with serviced apartments. Basically, medium-term accommodation on the outskirts of cities, whether that's for holiday lets or employees that are coming to work somewhere for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And he was getting several times the monthly rent by renting it out on a night by night or a week by week, or even in some cases a few months at a time. So yeah, a lot of them are doing HMOs, and it is a great way to do it. There are other options out there as well, though. Now, Mike and Sean, are most of yours lease options, or do you have a bit of a mix in there as well?
Yeah, so our portfolio, it is actually mixed, but we did identify from a very early stage that HMOs work better for ourselves. And the reason was, well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them was there's more cash flow in HMOs. It's a lot easier to achieve higher cash flow because on a couple of our single lets that we've got, if I give you an example, we've got a 3-bedroom house. It's not really the right area to rent out the rooms and get an individual, room by room basis. What we offered to the landlady was about £300 per month, and then we rent that out at £650 per month. And obviously, long-term tenant, it works really well. But the second thing that we identified with doing HMOs and how we thought it was, I'm not saying it's a better strategy, but certainly it puts us who are doing lease options in a strong position, is the fact of, if a tenant leaves, you've not got an empty house. On a HMO, if one tenant leaves, you've still got possibly 6-7 tenants still paying rent. So it doesn't hit you that hard. Whereas on a single let, if a tenant leaves, it could actually take maybe a couple of months to fill, or maybe 2 months to fill that property again. And in the meantime, you're losing rent, and you've still got to pay that lease fee to the landlady or the landlord. So to answer your question, we do have a mix, but the majority are HMOs because higher cash flow, and we feel it's a stronger position to put ourselves in.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think that covers it for the questions. There were a few more very specific questions in there that I don't think it's necessarily the best use of everyone's time to go into. I'm happy to field them over the next couple of days. So if you've got specific questions about your own strategy or how you can take it forward, I've put my email address in the chat box. Sean's email address is on screen. So by all means, feel free to reach out to us, whether you have specific questions or you want more information about the course that's coming up at the start of July. And we'll do our best to get back to you in the best way that we can. Now, Mike and John, just before we finish up, is there anything else you want to add, or have you exhausted your knowledge for this evening?
No, not at all. I mean, as far as our knowledge goes, I feel as though, this webinar tonight, it's only been 1 hour long, and I hope you have got a lot of content from it. But as far as our knowledge goes, there is a lot more that we do need to dig deeper into, and maybe we can help yourselves before you do go out and do this, because there is still probably some gaps in the knowledge we've got across today. But what I do want to get across is, if you are sitting there in a position where you feel as though you can't get into property because you can't get a mortgage or you haven't got enough funds, well, pardon me French, but I think that's a load of bollocks. Because you can get into property regardless of your situation. So I would just like to kind of just draw that line and say, stop making excuses and just get on with it. Yeah. So thank you for tonight, Mike. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Mike, as well. It's been great to have you both on. It's good to get the balance of perspectives. You obviously work very well together as a team. And like I say, if anyone is looking to employ lease options as a strategy, I think they could do a lot worse than spend this pretty small sum of money coming along to spend the day with you guys and learn from your experiences. I said at the very start, you can almost learn as much from people's mistakes, and I'm sure you have made some mistakes and you'll be sharing them as well.
Yeah, definitely. But you can't be scared to make mistakes. That, like you've just said, that they are where the greatest learning comes. Hopefully the what I call them mistakes, or things that you would do differently next time, haven't hurt you so much, and it's just a way of improving your systems, and that's what we've done along the way.
Excellent, good stuff. Okay, well, we will call it a night there. Thank you both once again. Thank you to our audience for joining.
Thank you for those listening. Thank you.
Excellent, guys. And if you've got any follow-up questions, like I say, Mike at insidepropertyinvesting.com or Sean at passiveproperty.com, and we will get back to you in the next couple of days. We will send out a recording of this as well, so if you want to go back and look at the details of the case studies, we'll get that video out to you within the next 24 hours, ideally. Thanks again. Have a good night, and hopefully we will speak to you all soon.
Okay.
Thank you.